An expectant single mother and her millionaire CEO sharing secrets in the office late into the night. Silence turned to love. And when the baby was born, secrets came to light, changing their lives forever. A story that will touch your heart. Subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and comment on where you are watching from. The storm arrived unexpectedly that Thursday in March, as it often does in New York, when winter stubbornly refuses to give way to spring. Sarah Johnson was on the 22nd floor of Skyline Tower, located on Fifth Avenue, when the first thunderclaps echoed between the skyscrapers. She adjusted her navy blazer over her 5-month baby bump and looked out the panoramic window, watching dark clouds engulf the city. "It's going to be chaos on the roads," she murmured to herself, mentally calculating how long it would take to reach her daughter's school if she left at that very moment. Sophia, 8 years old, hated storms, and Sarah could already picture the girl anxiously waiting at the front desk, nibbling her nails, a habit she had developed since her biological father disappeared from their lives. The office of Anderson and Associates occupied 3 floors of the building, and Sarah worked in the finance department, strategically located between the executive board and the operational departments. Their workstations were arranged in a modern environment, with glass partitions that allowed natural light in, but also made every movement visible. The constant aroma of Colombian coffee wafted from the Italian espresso machine the company had imported the previous year, a luxury she had never imagined would be within reach when she started working there 3 years ago. Sarah was the type of woman who blended into crowds but caught attention when someone truly observed her. Her brown hair was always tied back in a practical bun, and she wore understated prescription glasses. Pregnancy had softened her angular features, giving her a special glow in her green eyes that she tried to hide behind an impeccable professional demeanor. Her clothes were always well-pressed and coordinated, but clearly bought on sale, an elegance built on a tight budget and great taste. She was reviewing the monthly reports when the first hail began to pound against the windows. The noise was deafening, like thousands of marbles being hurled from the sky against the tempered glass. Employees began to crowd around the windows, pointing at the ice rain that was transforming Fifth Avenue into an apocalyptic scene. "I've never seen anything like this in March," commented Lisa, the executive secretary, a 50-year-old woman who had become Sarah's unofficial confidant. "Usually it's just heavy rain." Sarah nodded, but her attention was diverted by movement in the boardroom. Through the glass walls she could see Michael Anderson, the company's CEO, gesturing animatedly on the phone. Even from a distance it was impossible not to notice his imposing presence. Tall, slim, with dark hair, always perfectly styled, and suits that likely cost more than her monthly salary. Michael represented everything Sarah had learned to admire and fear at the same time: power, control, and an emotional distance that seemed insurmountable. At 38, Michael Anderson had inherited the company from his father 5 years earlier, transforming a family consultancy into a multinational with branches in 6 countries. His reputation in the financial market was impeccable, calculating, efficient, and relentlessly fair. Employees respected him, but few dared to engage in casual conversations with him. Sarah had observed him from afar over the past 3 years, noticing small details that others overlooked. How he always personally thanked the cleaning staff, how he knew the names of all the building's security guards, how his dark eyes seemed to carry a weight that had nothing to do with corporate responsibilities. The thunder that followed made everyone jump. The lights flickered twice before stabilizing, and the constant hum of the air conditioning abruptly ceased. Within seconds, the entire building plunged into tense silence, broken only by the sound of hail outside. "The power's out," said Lisa, checking her computer. "And it seems the emergency generator didn't kick in," Sarah glanced at the clock. 5:15. Sophia would be at school until 6, but without power. The elevators weren't working, and descending 22 flights of stairs while 5 months pregnant was not a viable option. It was then that Michael's voice echoed through the office. "Everyone, let's remain calm. I've already contacted building maintenance and the electric company technicians. It's likely just a matter of a few hours until we normalize." A few hours. Sarah felt her stomach tighten, not from pregnancy, but from anxiety. She grabbed her phone and dialed the school, but the call dropped halfway through. The storm was interfering with the phone signals. "Sarah, are you okay?" The voice came from behind her, deep and too close. Michael had approached her desk without her noticing. Up close, she could see that his dark eyes had small expression lines at the corners, and there was a small scar above his left eyebrow that she had never noticed. "I'm fine, thank you, Mr. Anderson." She quickly stood up, but the dizziness from her pregnancy made her lean on the desk. "It's just that I need to pick up my daughter from school, and with the elevators down." "Sophia, right?" The question surprised her. Did Michael know her daughter's name? 8 years old, attends St. Mary's School. Sarah nodded, confused. How did he know these details about her personal life? "I've already called the school administration. I explained the situation, and they confirmed that they will keep the children safe until their parents can pick them up. Sophia is fine, playing in the library with other kids who also stayed." The information should have reassured her, but it only increased her confusion. "How did you manage to talk to them? If the phone... Is it not working?" Michael pointed to a sophisticated device on his desk. "Satellite phone. Company investment for emergencies." He paused, observing her expression. "Sarah, can I call you Sarah? I think given the circumstances, we can drop the excessive formality." "Sure, Mr. Michael." The name came hesitantly from her lips. The hailstorm had ceased, but the regular rain continued to pour down. Through the window, they could see abandoned cars on the avenue, their hoods covered by a thick layer of ice. Centuries-old trees lay fallen on the sidewalk, and the distant wail of ambulance and fire truck sirens echoed. "I've never witnessed anything like this," Michael said, stopping beside her at the window. "New York always surprises us, doesn't it?" Sarah nodded, but she couldn't focus on the conversation. His physical proximity was creating a strange tension in the air. She could smell the subtle scent of his cologne. Something expensive, certainly, but not overpowering. Wood and spices, perhaps. "Sarah?" His voice had changed, becoming softer. "You're trembling." She looked at her own hands and realized he was right. It wasn't cold. The office maintained a pleasant temperature even without air conditioning. It was anxiety, mixed with something she couldn't name. "It's just the worry about Sophia," she lied. Michael studied her for a moment, his dark eyes seeming to read through her carefully constructed defenses. "Come with me," he finally said. "Let's make some coffee and wait together. I have a gas machine in my office, and I suspect it will be a long night for all of us." As she followed him through the dimly lit corridors, illuminated only by the grey light coming through the windows, Sarah couldn't imagine that this March storm would mark the beginning of a transformation that would change not only her life, but also her definitions of love, courage, and second chances. Michael Anderson's office was a private universe that Sarah had never imagined entering. Occupying a prime corner on the 23rd floor, the space combined corporate elegance with unexpectedly personal touches. The walls were covered in dark wood, and 2 of the 4 walls were entirely made up of floor-to-ceiling windows, offering a panoramic view of the city, now hidden beneath the grey mantle of the storm. "Sit wherever you like," Michael said, gesturing vaguely toward the leather armchairs arranged around a glass coffee table. I'll prepare the coffee. Sarah chose the chair that faced away from his desk, an instinctive attempt to maintain some emotional distance, as Michael fiddled with an Italian coffee machine that clearly did not belong to the standard office furniture. She observed the details that revealed fragments of his personality. A whole shelf was dedicated to books on humanized management and organizational psychology. On the desk, next to the computer, there was a small photo of an older couple, probably his parents, and an antique-looking fountain pen that seemed almost vintage. "My father gave me this pen when I took over the company," Michael said, noticing the direction of her gaze. "He used to say that a man can only lead other men if he remembers that everyone has important stories to tell." The sound of rain against the windows created a constant, almost hypnotic background. Sarah adjusted herself in the chair, trying to find a comfortable position to accommodate her belly. Her blouse had ridden up slightly, revealing a small portion of stretched skin, and she quickly adjusted it, realizing that Michael had noticed the movement. "When is the baby due?" His question came with the rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee. "August. End of August." Sarah accepted the cup, a fine porcelain piece with the company monogram embossed in gold. "Thank you. You didn't have to." "Of course I did." Michael sat in the chair across from her, maintaining a respectful distance but creating an intimacy forced by the circumstances. "We're stuck here indefinitely and you're pregnant. It's the least I can do." Sarah took a sip of the coffee and involuntarily closed her eyes. It was perfect, strong enough to comfort her, but not so much that it would harm the baby. "How did you know about Sophia? About where she studies?" Michael hesitated, turning the cup in his hands. "Would it be strange if I said I pay attention to all my employees?" "That would be a lie," Sarah replied, with a frankness that surprised her. Perhaps it was exhaustion or the surreal nature of the situation, but her usual guard was down. "There are over 200 people in this company. You can't know personal details about everyone." A discreet smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. "You're right. That would be a lie." Michael leaned back in the chair, and for the first time since she had known him, he seemed relaxed, almost vulnerable. "The truth is, you intrigue me, Sarah Johnson." "I intrigue you?" The question came out louder than she intended. "Why?" "Because you work more hours than any analyst who has ever been here, but you never ask for recognition. Because you have a brilliant analytical mind. Your reports are the best I receive, but you hide behind a formality that seems protective." Michael paused, observing her reaction. "And because, on the rare occasions you smile, the whole office seems to brighten." Sarah felt her face heat up. She wasn't used to this kind of attention, especially coming from him. I don't know what to say." "You don't need to say anything." Michael stood up and walked to the window, watching the storm-battered city. "Can I ask you a personal question?" "Depends on how personal." "Is the baby's father? Is he present?" The question hit Sarah like a punch to the stomach. She placed the cup on the table with more force than necessary, the sound echoing in the silent room. "No." "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to." "No, it's fine." Sarah took a deep breath, surprising herself with her willingness to open up. "He disappeared when he found out about the pregnancy. He said he already had enough responsibilities with his official family." Michael turned. Sarah stared at him, and she saw something unexpected in his eyes, genuine anger. "What kind of man does this?" "The kind I apparently choose," she replied with a bitterness she had kept to herself for months. "Emily doesn't have her father around either. It seems I have a special talent for this. Or maybe you have a special talent for being strong enough not to need them." The observation caught her off guard. Sarah looked at him, trying to decipher if there was condescension in his words, but found only sincerity. "You don't know me well enough to say that." "Maybe not." Michael sat down again, this time closer, on the edge of the coffee table. "But I know you raised Emily alone while finishing your degree in economics. I know you work weekends to afford her private school. I know you never miss work, even when you're clearly exhausted, and that you keep ginger candies in your drawer for when you have morning sickness, but you never let it affect your work." Sarah stared at him, speechless. "How do you know all this?" "Because I observe. Because it's impossible not to notice when someone works with the dedication you have." Michael paused, running his hand through his hair. "And because you make me want to be a better leader." "I do what?" "You make me question whether I'm really getting to know the people I work with, or if I'm just managing numbers and statistics." Michael stood up again, clearly uncomfortable with his own vulnerability. "My father always said a company is only as strong as the stories of the people who build it. I always thought that was very sentimental, but watching you, I'm starting to understand what he meant." Sarah remained silent for a long moment, processing his words. Outside, the storm seemed to be easing, but inside the room, a different tension was building. Something electric, dangerous, and unexplored. "Why are you telling me this?" she finally asked. Michael sat down again, this time on the arm of the chair next to her, close enough for her to see the small lines of fatigue around his eyes. "Because we're stuck here, and because I've wanted to have this conversation with you for 3 years, but I never found the courage or opportunity." "Michael!" Sarah began, but was interrupted by a loud knock on the door. "Mr. Anderson," it was Lisa's voice. "The technicians have arrived. They say it will take at least another 2 hours to restore power, and there's a situation downstairs. Several cars were damaged by hail, and some people are asking to stay in the building until things normalize." Michael sighed, the corporate reality invading the intimate moment they had built. "I'm coming, Lisa. Thank you." He stood up and looked at Sarah. "I need to handle this, but you can stay here if you want. It's more comfortable than out there, and—" "No," Sarah interrupted, standing up as well. "I'll go with you. If other people are struggling, I can help in some way." Michael watched her for a moment, and Sarah saw something new in his eyes. Admiration, perhaps, or recognition. "Of course you would do that," he said almost to himself. As they walked together down the dark corridor toward the main office, Sarah knew that something fundamental had changed between them that stormy afternoon. What she didn't yet know was whether this change would bring them closer together or create complications neither of them was prepared to face. The main office had turned into an improvised shelter. The ice-keen, grey afternoon light filtering through the windows cast long shadows among the desks, where about 20 employees huddled with blankets borrowed from storage. The aroma of instant coffee mixed with the smell of rain seeping through the cracks of the poorly sealed windows. Sarah descended the stairs beside Michael, watching how he naturally took control of the situation. "Everyone, we've been in touch with the electric company technicians," he announced, his voice echoing in the space. "The storm damaged 3 substations in the area. They're estimating another 2 hours for full power restoration." A collective murmur of disappointment swept through the group. Sarah saw Lisa setting up a small coffee and snack station at the reception desk, using a portable stove someone had brought from home. Near the window, 2 security guards were quietly discussing the damaged cars in the parking lot. "Mr. Anderson," called David, the company accountant, a middle-aged man Sarah knew was a personal friend of Michael's from college. "I just got a call from my wife. The subway is down on the Green Line and several streets are flooded. Even when the power comes back, it will be difficult to get out of here." Michael nodded, processing the information. "Then let's organize for a longer stay." He looked around the group, his eyes briefly stopping on Sarah before continuing. Who has special needs? Medications, children waiting, urgent situations. Sarah hesitated. Technically, picking up Emily fell under the category of urgent situation, but Michael had already resolved that issue. Still, the anxiety of being away from her daughter during a crisis consumed her inside. Sarah is pregnant, Lisa said, anticipating, and she has a daughter at school. That's already taken care of, Michael replied quickly, casting a reassuring glance at Sarah. The school has been contacted and Emily is safe. The ease with which he had remembered her daughter's name did not go unnoticed by the other employees. Sarah felt the curious looks, raised eyebrows, and discreet whispers. In a company where Michael was known for his professional distance, that gesture of personal attention was noteworthy. I need to check the damage in the parking lot, Michael said. David, can you come with me? And Sarah? He paused as if weighing his words. Could you coordinate the distribution of food and water? Lisa can help you. Sarah nodded, but a part of her questioned. Sarah felt her face heat up. It's not like that, Lisa. It was just the circumstances. Sure, dear, the circumstances. Lisa lowered her voice. But can I give you some advice? Michael Anderson isn't like the other men you've met. He doesn't play games, doesn't lie, and doesn't shy away from responsibilities. How do you know about the other men? Lisa shrugged. 3 years watching you work double shifts. 3 years seeing you come in tired. 3 years noticing that you never talk about family or a boyfriend. You don't need to be a detective to put the pieces together. The conversation was interrupted by the return of Michael and David. They were soaked from the waist down, their dark pants dripping water onto the marble floor. Complicated situation down there, reported Michael, accepting a towel that Lisa quickly offered. 18 cars with significant damage. The parking lot is flooded with at least a foot of water. My car was down there, said one of the junior analysts, her voice heavy with concern. I just bought it. I'm still paying. We'll sort this out, Michael replied immediately. The company has comprehensive insurance for emergencies. No one will bear the losses alone. Sarah observed the employees' reactions. Relief, gratitude, and something more, a kind of loyalty that went beyond the professional. Michael wasn't just fulfilling legal obligations. He was genuinely concerned for the well-being of each person there. Michael, called David, discreetly pulling him aside. Sarah couldn't hear the conversation, but she saw Michael's expression change, a crease of worry appearing between his eyebrows. A few minutes later, Michael approached her. Sarah, can I talk to you for a moment? They walked to a more secluded table near the windows. The rain had diminished to a light drizzle, but the sky remained heavy, suggesting that the storm wasn't completely over. David brought me some information about you, Michael said, his voice low and careful. About a possible promotion. Sarah's stomach tightened. What kind of information? The regional board is considering transferring you to the Austin branch. A significant promotion, regional coordinator of financial analysis. Michael watched her closely. Did you know about this? Sarah shook her head slowly. No, no one told me anything. The proposal is still under discussion. It would be a 40% salary increase, expanded benefits, private school tuition for Emily. Michael paused. And a move in 6 weeks. 6 weeks. Sarah felt as if the air had been sucked from her lungs. But I can't move. Emily is settled in school. I have a doctor here for the baby. My whole life is in New York. I know. Michael ran a hand through his wet hair, a gesture that Sarah was beginning to recognize as a sign of his nervousness. That's why David thought I should know. He thought that maybe I would want to intervene in some way. Why would you want to intervene? The question hung in the air between them, laden with unspoken meanings. Michael stared at her for a long moment, as if deciding whether to cross a line that he could not uncross. "Because the idea of you leaving is—" He stopped, started again. "Because this company would be a very different, much emptier place without you here." Sarah felt her heart race. "Michael, I know I have no right to interfere in your professional decisions," he continued quickly. "I know it would be selfish of me to try to influence something that could be very good for you and for Emily, but the truth is that— The truth is—" "What?" Michael looked out the window, watching the city slowly emerge from the chaos of the storm. When he turned back to her, there was a vulnerability in his eyes that she had never seen before. "The truth is that I've been waiting for an opportunity like this afternoon for 3 years. 3 years, trying to find the courage to tell you that you are the first thing I look for when I arrive at the office in the morning, and the last person I think about when I leave at night." Sarah remained silent, processing his words. Around them, the murmur of the other employees created a backdrop of normalcy that contrasted with the intensity of the moment they were experiencing. "You can't say that," she finally whispered. "Why not?" "Because you are my boss, because I work for you, because—" Her voice faltered. "Because it complicates everything." "It was already complicated," Michael replied softly. "At least now it's honest." Before Sarah could respond, the office lights flickered twice and then stabilized. The familiar hum of the air conditioning returned, and a murmur of relief swept through the group of employees. "The power is back," someone announced unnecessarily. Sarah looked at Michael, knowing that the return to normalcy meant the end of that suspended moment in time. They would have to return to their roles, to their positions, to the complexities of the real world. But something had changed irreversibly between them that stormy afternoon, and they both knew there was no longer any way to pretend it was just a professional relationship. "We're going to have to talk about this," Sarah finally said. Michael nodded. "We will, but not today. Today you need to go home, pick up Emily, and process all of this." As the employees began to organize themselves to leave, Sarah knew she was facing the first major crossroads of a journey that had only just begun. 3 weeks had passed since the storm, and Sarah discovered that it was impossible to return to the previous normality. Every morning, upon arriving at the office, her eyes involuntarily searched for Michael through the glass walls of his office, and invariably she found him looking back. These moments of eye contact lasted only seconds, but created a tension that accompanied her for the rest of the day. Autumn had truly arrived now, bringing fresh mornings that required cardigans and the unmistakable scent of dry leaves accumulating on the sidewalks of Fifth Avenue. Sarah was in her 6th month of pregnancy, and her body had visibly changed, forcing her to adapt her corporate wardrobe with looser dresses and blazers that no longer closed completely. It was a Tuesday in April when the situation escalated to a new level. Sarah was reviewing the third-quarter projections when Emily appeared in the office, accompanied by the school's educational coordinator. The girl was visibly shaken, her eyes red from crying, clutching a small backpack against her chest. "Ms. Johnson," said the coordinator, an elegant woman in her 50s. "There has been an incident at school. Emily got into a fight with a classmate, and we need you to come pick her up." Sarah felt her stomach tighten. Emily was a gentle child. She would never get into fights without reason. What exactly happened? The boy said some things about different families. Emily reacted poorly and pushed him. The coordinator lowered her voice. "There were comments about her not having a father and about you being pregnant without being married." The anger Sarah felt was instant and fierce. She stood up from her chair, her hand automatically positioning itself protectively over her belly. "And what was done regarding the boy who provoked my daughter?" "Both received a warning, but according to the school regulations—" "Sarah." Michael's voice interrupted the conversation. He had left his office and was approaching the group, his attention completely focused on Emily, who shrank behind her mother's legs. "Is everything okay?" "Problem at school," Sarah replied briefly, trying to maintain emotional control. "I'm taking Emily home." Michael knelt down to Emily's height, a gesture that surprised Sarah with its naturalness. "Hi, Emily. Remember me? I'm Michael. I work with your mom." Emily nodded shyly, but did not step away from him. Michael had that rare ability to genuinely connect with children, speaking to them as real people, not as diminished versions of adults. "You know what I used to do when I was little and felt sad?" Michael continued. "My mum would let me draw on my dad's desk with very special colored pencils. How about you do that here while your mum sorts out the paperwork?" Emily looked at Sarah, who hesitated, but nodded. The coordinator seemed about to protest. After all, this was the CEO of the company, but Michael was already guiding Emily toward his office. "Ms. Johnson," the coordinator said when they were alone, "I know this is a delicate situation, but the school regulations are clear about aggressive behavior." "My daughter was provoked and humiliated by comments about our family structure," Sarah interrupted, her voice colder than she intended. "If the school regulations do not protect children from bullying based on prejudice, perhaps it's time for me to reconsider if this is the right environment for her." The conversation continued for another 15 minutes, with Sarah having to control her irritation, while listening to bureaucratic explanations about disciplinary policies. When it finally ended, she headed to Michael's office, preparing to pick up Emily and go home. What she found left her speechless. Emily was sitting in Michael's executive chair, which had been lowered to accommodate her height. In front of her, the desk was covered with sheets of paper and a box of professional colored pencils that definitely did not belong to standard office supplies. But what impressed Sarah the most was her daughter's absolute concentration, drawing with an intensity she hadn't seen in months. Michael was sitting in a chair, beside her, working on his laptop, occasionally commenting on the colors Emily chose or asking questions about her drawings. The scene had a natural domesticity that made Sarah's heart race alarmingly. "Mom!" Emily looked up when Sarah entered the room. "Look what I made!" The drawing showed 3 figures, a woman with a big belly, a small girl, and a tall man in a suit. They were holding hands in front of a building that clearly was the office. In the upper corner, Emily had written in neat handwriting, "My new family." Sarah felt her eyes fill with tears. "Emily, sweetheart." "Michael said families can be any way," Emily continued excitedly. "He said what matters is that people take care of each other and love each other." Sarah looked at Michael, who had stood up and seemed slightly embarrassed. "Emily, you can't just—" "She was just expressing how she feels," Michael gently interrupted. "And from what I understood from our conversation, the boy at school said she didn't have a normal family because you aren't married." "And what did you say to her?" Sarah's question came with an intensity that surprised everyone. Michael looked directly at her. "I said, normal family is one where people love and protect each other, and that she is very lucky to have a mom who works so hard to take care of her and the baby that's coming." Emily nodded vigorously. "And I told him that Michael is like a dad to me now." The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah saw Michael pale slightly, and she herself felt as if she was stepping on quicksand. Emily's innocence had verbalized something that both adults had been carefully avoiding acknowledging. "Emily," Sarah said in a controlled voice, "we need to talk about this at home. Michael is my boss and—" "But he likes us," Emily insisted. "I see how he looks at you, Mom. It's just like the way Julia's dad looks at her mom." Sarah felt her face heat up furiously. "Emily, enough. Grab your drawings and let's go home." "Sarah, wait." Michael approached her, lowering his voice. "Can we talk for a moment? Emily can stay here drawing a bit longer." Sarah hesitated, but his serious expression convinced her. They stepped out to the principal's waiting area, leaving the door ajar so they could see Emily. "I'm sorry," Michael said immediately. "I shouldn't have. It wasn't my place to interfere in the school's situation." "That's not it." Sarah shook her head, struggling to organize her thoughts. "It's just that, Michael, Emily is getting attached to you in a way that could hurt her if I disappear from your lives," he completed. "Exactly." Sarah took a deep breath. She's been through this before. Her biological father promised to be present and then vanished. She spent months asking when he would come back. Michael was silent for a moment, watching Emily through the slightly open door. The girl continued drawing, occasionally glancing at them with curiosity. "What if I don't disappear?" he finally asked. "What do you mean? What if, instead of protecting Emily from the potential of getting hurt, we considered the possibility of building something real, something that doesn't have to end?" Sarah stared at him, feeling as if the ground had disappeared beneath her feet. "Michael, you don't know what you're talking about. You don't understand the complications, the responsibilities." "Then teach me," he said simply. "Let me in." Before Sarah could respond, Emily appeared at the door, holding a new drawing. "Can I show you?" This drawing was different. It depicted 4 figures now, the 3 previous ones plus a small baby in the woman's arms. And in the corner, written in even more elaborate handwriting, it said, "Complete Family." Sarah looked at her daughter, then at Michael, then at the drawing that represented a future she had learned not to dream about, and for the first time in years, she allowed herself to consider that maybe, just maybe, second chances were possible. "Let's go home, Emily," she finally said. "We have a lot to talk about." As they left the office, Sarah carried more than just her daughter's drawings. She carried the seed of a possibility that scared her as much as it excited her. The summer festival arrived in Austin with the characteristic aroma of mulled wine and corn pudding, wafting even through the corporate hallways of Anderson and Associates. Lisa had taken the lead in organizing the company party, transforming the 22nd floor into an improvised fairground. Colorful flags hung from the ceiling, creating a cheerful contrast with the usually formal office environment. Sarah was now in her 7th month of pregnancy, and every movement required more effort. She had chosen a navy blue dress that comfortably accommodated her prominent belly, but still felt awkward navigating the decorated hallways. The baby had become more active in recent weeks, kicking vigorously whenever she sat for too long. "Are you sure you want to participate?" Lisa asked for the 3rd time that afternoon, adjusting one of the flags that had come loose. "It can be tiring to stand for so long." "I'm pregnant, not disabled," Sarah replied, although she secretly appreciated her friend's concern. "Besides, Emily is excited to see where I work. She won't stop asking about the people here." Lisa smiled mischievously, "Especially about one specific person, I imagine." Sarah pretended not to understand the comment, but she knew exactly who Lisa was referring to. In the 2 weeks following the incident at school, Michael had found subtle ways to be present in their lives. Flowers discreetly left on her desk on Mondays, a special snack from the bakery that Emily had mentioned liking, which mysteriously appeared in the break room fridge. Small gestures that could be interpreted as professional courtesy, but carried undeniable intimacy. "Is he coming today?" Sarah tried to keep her voice casual, but Lisa wasn't fooled. "Michael?" For the first time in 5 years of company parties, he confirmed his attendance. Lisa paused dramatically. "Interesting coincidence, don't you think?" Before Sarah could respond, the elevator door opened and Emily appeared, accompanied by the nanny Sarah had hired for a few hours. The girl was wearing a complete summer festival outfit with a flared skirt and a bow in her hair, and her eyes sparkled with excitement at seeing the transformed office. "Mom, it looks just like a real party." Emily ran towards Sarah, stopping abruptly when she noticed other adults watching her. The girl's natural shyness emerged, and she partially hid behind her mother's legs. "Everyone, this is Emily, my daughter," announced Sarah, affectionately running her hand through the girl's hair. "Emily, these are my co-workers." David, who was near the mulled wine table, approached with a genuine smile. "Emily, I've heard so many good things about you. Your mom always talks about how smart you are." Emily smiled shyly, but didn't step out from behind Sarah. It was then that the door to Michael's office opened, and he appeared wearing, to everyone's surprise, a red plaid shirt and dark jeans, a sophisticated version of the typical summer festival attire. "Good evening, everyone," Michael said, his voice echoing through the space. His eyes immediately found Sarah and Emily, and his face lit up with a smile she rarely saw during business hours. "Emily, I'm so glad you came." Emily's reaction was immediate. She stepped out from behind Sarah and ran toward Michael, who bent down to welcome her with a natural and spontaneous hug. The scene did not go unnoticed by the other employees, who exchanged meaningful glances. "Michael, you're dressed just like the people from the school party," Emily said excitedly. "And look, I brought a new drawing for you." Sarah watched the interaction, feeling a complex mix of tenderness and apprehension. The ease with which Emily connecting with Michael was both comforting and terrifying. The way his eyes softened when he looked at the girl revealed a side of his personality that few had the privilege to know. "This drawing is even more beautiful than the previous ones," Michael said, carefully examining the paper that Emily handed him. "Did you draw the summer festival?" "Yes. And look, I drew everyone. You, me, my mom, the baby, and even Lisa." Emily pointed to each figure in the drawing. "And there are little flags just like the ones here." Sarah approached to see the drawing and felt her heart tighten. Once again, Emily had portrayed Michael as an integral part of her family, naturally including him in a happy domestic scene. "Emily, sweetheart," Sarah said carefully, "remember we talked about not assuming that people will stay in our lives forever." Emily completed with a seriousness that surprised the adults around. "But Michael is different, Mum. He promised he wouldn't leave." An awkward silence fell over the group. Sarah looked at Michael, who seemed slightly pale. "When did I promise that, Emily?" he asked gently. "When you said that real families always take care of each other," Emily replied, with the relentless logic of children. "And you take care of us, so you are our family." David discreetly coughed, breaking the tense moment. "How about trying the mulled wine? Lisa made a special non-alcoholic version for Emily and Sarah." As the group dispersed towards the drink table, Michael approached Sarah. "We need to talk," he said quietly. "Yes, we do." Sarah watched Emily, who had been adopted by Lisa and was now being introduced to the other staff. "She's getting her hopes up, Michael, and I don't know how to handle it. Maybe the question is, do you want me to be part of your lives? For real?" Michael looked her directly in the eye. "Because if the answer is yes, we can figure out together how to make this work." Sarah felt the baby kick vigorously, as if reacting to her emotional tension. "Michael, you don't understand the complications. Then explain them to me." He stepped closer, lowering his voice even more. "Explain to me why you're so determined to keep me at a distance when it's obvious that something real is happening between us. Because I've made that mistake before." The response came out louder than Sarah intended, making a few heads turn in their direction. She took a deep breath, trying to compose herself. Because I trusted promises before, and Emily paid the price when they were broken. Michael was silent for a moment, watching Emily, who was now laughing at something David had said. What if I told you I've never made a promise I didn't keep? I would say you've never had to make really hard promises. Like the promise to love a child, who isn't mine as if she were. Like the promise to be there when you need me, even when it's inconvenient. Like the promise to build a family with someone who's been hurt and has every reason not to trust. Sarah stared at him, surprised by the specificity of his words. Michael. Sarah, I'm not joking here. I'm not living in a fantasy or going through a phase. His voice had taken on an intensity she had never heard before. I'm in love with you. I'm in love with Emily. And I'm in love with the idea of us being a family. The words hit Sarah like successive waves. In love, family, promises, everything she had learned to fear and desire at the same time. You don't even know me well, she whispered. I know you take your coffee with 2 sugars because you need the energy, but you drink chamomile tea at night to relax. I know you work late, not just out of financial necessity, but because you're afraid of not being good enough. I know you sing to Emily every night, and that your voice goes a little off-key on the high notes, but she loves it. Anyway, Sarah felt exposed, as if Michael had opened an intimate book about her life. How do you know all this? Because I pay attention, because you matter to me. Michael paused, watching Emily, who was now teaching Lisa how to draw a little flag. And because I want to know everything else I don't know yet. Before Sarah could respond, Emily ran towards them, holding a cup of non-alcoholic mulled wine. Mom, try it. It's really good. The girl offered the cup to Sarah, then looked at Michael. Are you going to dance with us? Lisa said there will be music. Michael looked at Sarah, a silent question in his eyes. Sarah knew that her answer at that moment would be about more than just a simple dance. It would be about allowing him to become a real part of their lives, with all the risks and possibilities that entailed. Of course, Sarah finally said, surprising herself. Let's dance. As the music began to play and the staff organized for the improvised dance, Sarah realized she had made a decision without even realizing it. For the first time in years, she was choosing to trust, choosing to take a risk, choosing to believe that maybe, just maybe, happy endings were possible for people like her. July arrived in Austin with that typical dry cold of Texas winter, and Sarah was in her 8th month of pregnancy when the first major crisis exploded. It was a rainy Monday, and she had arrived at the office earlier than usual, hoping to finish some reports before the morning sickness, which inexplicably had returned in the 3rd trimester, intensified. The office was quiet, with only the cleaning crew and security present. Sarah settled at her desk, turned on her computer, and began to work, taking advantage of the tranquility to focus on the complex numbers that required her full attention. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee wafted from the vending machine. Michael had arranged for an installation near her workspace, another one of his thoughtful gestures that were officially improvements for all employees, but she knew were specifically aimed at her comfort. It was when she was going to get her 2nd cup of coffee that Sarah heard voices coming from Michael's office. One was his, but the other was feminine, elegant, with a slightly French accent that denoted refined education. Sarah hesitated, not wanting to eavesdrop, but something in the tension of the voices made her stop near the ajar door. Michael, darling, I know it's been a long time, but we need to talk about us, the feminine voice said. Paris made me think, made me realize what really matters. Sarah felt her stomach tighten. She recognized that voice from the few times she had answered calls for Michael. It was Isabella Moore, his ex-wife, who had spent 2 years in Europe finding herself after the divorce. Isabella, you can't just show up here after 2 years and expect nothing to have... It changed, Michael replied, his voice tense in a way Sarah rarely heard. But things have changed, darling. I have changed. The sound of high heels echoed on the wooden floor of the office. I'm ready now, ready for us to be a real family. I can accept children, Michael. I know that has always been important to you. Sarah leaned against the wall, feeling as if she had been punched in the stomach. Children. Family. The same words Michael had used with her, now being offered by someone who represented everything Sarah was not. Sophisticated, educated in Europe, from a traditional family in New York. Isabella, Michael paused, and Sarah imagined him running his hand through his hair, that gesture she had learned to recognize when he was nervous. Things are more complicated now. Complicated how? Isabella's voice took on a sharper tone. Michael, I know you're involved with an employee. My mother told me about the comments in high society. A pregnant woman with a daughter. Sarah closed her eyes, feeling the humiliation burn in her throat. Of course, the New York elite was a small circle, and Michael dating a pregnant single financial analyst would certainly be gossip at dinner parties in the Upper East Side. Don't talk about her like that, Michael said, his voice carrying a dangerous irritation. Like what, darling? I'm just being realistic. Isabella laughed, a crystalline and cruel sound. Do you really believe you can build a solid future with someone so different from us? Someone who couldn't even keep the father of her own children interested? The comment hit Sarah like a physical slap. She stepped away from the door, quickly walking back to her desk, but Isabella's words echoed in her mind like poison. Couldn't even keep the father of her own children interested. Sarah sat heavily in her chair, her hands trembling as she tried to focus on the numbers on the screen. But the tears blurred her vision, and for the first time in months, she allowed herself to question whether Michael really knew what he was getting into. An hour later, when Lisa arrived and found Sarah clearly shaken, the situation became even more complicated. Sarah, what happened? You look pale, Lisa said, approaching her desk. Michael's ex-wife is here, Sarah murmured, still trying to process everything she had heard. Isabella here? Lisa frowned. But wasn't she in Europe? Apparently she's back. And from what I heard, Sarah paused, trying to steady her voice. She wants to rekindle the marriage. She said she's ready to have children now. Lisa sat on the edge of Sarah's desk, her expression serious. And what did Michael say? I don't know. I left before the conversation ended. Sarah rubbed her eyes, trying to prevent the tears from falling. Lisa, maybe she's right. Maybe I'm being naive, thinking someone like Michael really wants to build a life with someone like me. Sarah Johnson, stop that right now, Lisa said firmly. You are not going to diminish yourself because of a woman who abandoned her own husband to find herself in Europe. But the poison of Isabella's words had already spread. Throughout the rest of the morning, Sarah watched Michael through the glass walls, seeing him in meeting after meeting, without their eyes meeting even once. She noticed he seemed tense, distracted, and that his hands moved more frequently to his hair, all signs of stress she had learned to recognize. It was at lunchtime that the situation exploded publicly. Sarah was returning from the restroom when she saw Isabella leaving Michael's office. The woman was exactly as Sarah had imagined. Tall, elegant, wearing an outfit that clearly cost more than her monthly salary. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled, and she carried a handbag that Sarah recognized from fashion magazines as being from a luxury Parisian brand. Isabella stopped when she saw Sarah, her blue eyes making a quick and undisguised assessment. You must be Sarah, she said, extending a perfectly manicured hand. Isabella Moore. Nice to meet you. Sarah shook the offered hand, feeling awkward and overweight compared to Isabella's natural elegance. "Nice to meet you," she murmured. "Michael told me about you," Isabella continued, her smile not reaching her eyes. "How brave of you to raise 2 children alone. It must be very challenging." The condescension in her tone was subtle but unmistakable. Sarah felt her face heat up, but before she could respond, Michael appeared behind Isabella. Isabella was leaving, he said quickly, his eyes meeting Sarah's with an expression she couldn't decipher. "Sarah, can we talk for a moment?" "Sure," Sarah replied, although her voice came out weaker than she intended. Isabella smiled again, kissed Michael on the cheek, an intimate gesture that did not go unnoticed by anyone in the office, and headed for the elevator. "Think about what we discussed, darling. Some opportunities don't come twice." The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah could feel the stares of her colleagues, the whispered conversations, the weight of speculation. She followed Michael to his office, each step feeling like an eternity. "Sarah, about what you heard this morning," Michael began as soon as he closed the door. "You don't owe me explanations," Sarah interrupted, trying to maintain some dignity. "Your personal life is yours." "Don't say that." Michael stepped closer to her, but Sarah took a step back. "Of course I owe you explanations. We are... What are we, Michael?" The question came loaded with all the insecurity that Sarah had tried to hide. "Because this morning I heard your ex-wife offering exactly what you always said you wanted, a traditional family with no complications, no problematic past stories." "Sarah, that's not..." "And maybe she's right," Sarah continued, the words pouring out in a torrent. "Maybe I'm being selfish, thinking I can offer something to a man like you. Maybe Emily and I are just a temporary fantasy, a phase you're going through, before you return to your real world." Michael stared at her for a long moment, and Sarah saw something break in his eyes. "Is that what you really think of me?" "I don't know what to think anymore," Sarah admitted, tears finally escaping. "I just know I can't keep exposing Emily to this. She's already gotten too attached, and if you decide that your ex-wife offers a more suitable future..." "Sarah, look at me," Michael said, his voice taking on a firmness she rarely heard. "Look at me and tell me if you really believe I'm the kind of man who would play with a child's feelings." Sarah met his gaze, seeing the genuine pain in his eyes, but she couldn't respond. The poison of Isabella's words had taken root too deeply to be easily uprooted. "I need time," she finally said. "I need to think about all of this." Michael nodded slowly. "How much time do you need?" "I don't know. Maybe it's better if we keep our distance for now. Professionally, of course." The words created an abyss between them that both felt physically. Michael stepped back, returning to his desk, the physical distance symbolizing the emotional one Sarah had just imposed. "If that's what you want," he finally said. "It's what I need," Sarah corrected, though every fiber of her being screamed the opposite. When she left Michael's office, Sarah knew she had made a decision that could protect her from pain, but it would also deprive her of the possibility of a happiness she had learned to desire again. The following 2 weeks were the hardest Sarah had faced since discovering her second pregnancy. Michael strictly adhered to the request for professional distance, communicating with her only through formal emails and strictly necessary meetings. When their paths crossed in the hallways, he greeted her with a cold courtesy that hurt more than any direct confrontation. Emily, for her part, had noticed the change in her mother's mood and constantly asked about Michael. "Why doesn't he come to dinner with us anymore? Why do you look sad when I draw him?" The innocent questions were like knives to Sarah's heart, constantly reminding her of what she had chosen to abandon. It was a grey Thursday in August when Sarah decided to work late to make up for the hours she had lost at weekly medical appointments. She was in her 9th month now, and Dr. Smith had warned that the baby could arrive at any moment. Her belly was enormous, making every movement a careful operation, but she refused to take leave before it was absolutely necessary. The office was practically empty when Sarah finally finished reviewing the third-quarter reports. It was almost 9 in the evening, and only she, 2 security guards, and Michael remained in the building. She could see the light from his office still on through the glass walls. Sarah was organizing her belongings when she felt the first contraction. It wasn't particularly strong, more like an intense cramp, but it lasted long enough to make her stop and take a deep breath. She looked at the clock. 9:15 p.m. "It's probably just Braxton Hicks contractions," she murmured to herself, recalling the doctor's advice. With Emily, labor had lasted 12 hours, so she had time. 10 minutes later, the second contraction came stronger. Sarah held onto the edge of the desk, waiting for it to pass. When she looked up, she saw Michael standing in the doorway of her office, watching her with concern. "Sarah, are you okay?" "I'm fine," she replied automatically. But another contraction hit her mid-sentence, causing her to bend slightly. Michael crossed the distance between them in 3 long strides. "How long have they been happening?" Just 2. Probably false." Sarah tried to straighten up, but Michael was already by her side, one hand gently touching her back. "What's the interval?" 10 minutes, maybe less." Sarah looked at him, seeing the genuine concern in his eyes, and felt the defenses she had built begin to crumble. "Michael, we're going to the hospital," he said firmly. "Now." "No, I can drive. I just need to call Lisa to pick up Emily." "Sarah, you're in labor. It's 9 at night and you're not driving alone." Michael was already grabbing her coat and bag. "I'll take you. We can call Lisa on the way." Another contraction, stronger than the previous ones, made Sarah groan involuntarily. Michael held her by the shoulders, his dark eyes fixed on hers. "Breathe with me," he said softly, slowly. "Inhale, exhale." Sarah followed his guidance, surprised by the calm his presence brought her. When the contraction passed, she looked at him. "Why are you doing this, after everything I said?" "Because I love you," Michael replied simply, "and because you're having my child." "It's not your child," Sarah began, but Michael interrupted her. "It is. Blood, but it's mine because you are mine, because Emily is mine, because this family is mine, whether you accept it or not." The tears that Sarah had been holding back for 2 weeks finally overflowed. "Michael, I'm so scared." "I know," he said, carefully wrapping his arms around her. "I'm scared too, but we'll face this together." The drive to the hospital was a mix of tension and forced intimacy. Michael drove cautiously, one hand on the wheel, and the other holding Sarah's whenever the contractions came. They were coming every 5 minutes now, and Sarah knew there was no turning back. "Did you call Lisa?" she asked between contractions. "I did. She's on her way to pick up Emily and will take her to her place tonight." Michael shot her a quick glance. "And I called Dr. Smith. He'll meet us at the hospital." "Do you remember my doctor's name?" "Sarah, I remember everything about you. Your doctor's name, the brand of shampoo you use, the fact that you're afraid of elevators when you're nervous, that you sing off-key but Emily loves it anyway." His voice faltered slightly. "I remember everything because I've loved you for 3 years, and these 2 weeks apart have been the worst of my life." Sarah closed her eyes, letting his words penetrate the defenses she had built. "Isabella said I could never keep even the father of my children interested. Isabella said that to hurt you, because she knows she's losing." Michael stopped at the red light and turned fully to face Sarah. "Listen to me. The men who abandoned you weren't real men. They were scared boys who couldn't recognize the treasure they had in front of them. I'm not one of them." A particularly strong contraction made Sarah groan loudly. and Michael stepped on the gas as soon as the light turned green. "We're almost there," he said, his own tension evident in his voice. "Hang in there." "Michael," Sarah said when the contraction passed, "if anything goes wrong, nothing is going to go wrong. But if it does, I want you to know that these months have been the best of my life, that for the first time I felt truly loved." Michael swallowed hard, his eyes fixed. "On the road, nothing is going to go wrong because we have a lifetime ahead of us. You, me, Emily, this baby, and all the other children we're going to have together." "Other children?" Sarah managed to laugh through her tears. "At least 2 more. Emily has already told me she wants 3 siblings." Michael smiled, that genuine smile she had missed so much. "And I always agree with the women in my life." They arrived at the hospital just in time. Dr. Smith was waiting for them at the entrance of the maternity ward with a wheelchair, and within minutes, Sarah was being examined in a prep room. 6 centimeters dilated, the doctor announced. "This baby is in a hurry. Let's go to the delivery room." "Michael," Sarah called as the nurses began to move her. "Are you going to stay?" "You couldn't get me out of here even with a court order," he replied, already putting on the hospital gown a nurse had handed him. 3 hours later, when the strong and healthy cry of Lucas Anderson, a name Sarah had chosen during one of the most intense contractions, whispering to Michael, "If you really want to be his father, he needs to have your last name," echoed through the delivery room, Sarah knew her life had changed forever in every possible way. Michael held the baby with the reverence of someone who had just received the greatest gift in the world, tears streaming freely down his face. "He's perfect," he murmured, placing Lucas in Sarah's arms. "We are a real family now." Sarah looked at the man she had chosen to love despite all her fears, at the baby who represented a new beginning, and knew that sometimes, when you have enough courage to trust, happy endings are not just possible, they are inevitable. 3 days after Lucas's birth, Sarah was at home, adjusting to the new routine of being a mother of 2, when she received the call that would change everything. It was David, and his voice carried a tension she had never heard before. "Sarah, did you see the news about the company today?" "No. Why? Did something happen?" Sarah adjusted Lucas in her lap, trying to find a comfortable position to breastfeed while talking on the phone. "Michael resigned." The words hit Sarah like a lightning bolt. The phone almost slipped from her hand. "He did what?" "He submitted his resignation letter to the board on Monday morning. It's being kept under wraps, but the news leaked this morning." David paused. "Sarah, do you know anything? Did you 2 talk about this?" Sarah stood up abruptly, making Lucas whimper. "No, David. Since Lucas's birth, we haven't talked about work." She began to pace the room, trying to process the information. Why would he do this? The company is his life. "I don't know, but there are rumors that it has to do with family pressure. His mother is furious about the whole situation. You 2, the baby. Apparently there was a nasty argument last week." Sarah felt her stomach tighten. She knew Michael's family disapproved of their relationship. The subtle hints during his hospital visits had made that clear. But she never imagined the pressure would reach this point. "Where is he now?" Sarah asked. "No one knows. He cleared out his office over the weekend and isn't answering his work phone." David hesitated before continuing. "Sarah, I think you need to talk to him. Whatever's going on, you're a part of it." After hanging up the phone, Sarah sat heavily on the couch, Lucas finally asleep in her arms. Emily, who had been quiet, during the conversation she approached with her keen, childlike perception. "Mom, is it about Michael? Is he not coming to visit us anymore?" Sarah looked at her daughter, at the baby in her arms, at the life they had started to build together, and knew she couldn't just wait for answers. She needed to act. Emily, sweetheart, how about we go pay him a visit? 2 hours later, Sarah was standing in front of Michael's apartment in West Side, Lucas sleeping in. The stroller and Emily nervously holding her hand. The building was elegant, discreet, with that quiet sophistication that characterized the neighborhood. Sarah had never been there before. All their meetings took place in neutral territory or at her house. When the door opened, Sarah barely recognized the man in front of her. Michael was disheveled, wearing a simple t-shirt and sweatpants, with a 3-day beard that completely altered his appearance. Even more disturbing were his eyes, empty in a way she had never seen before. "Sarah? What are you doing here?" "I came to find out why you're destroying your life," Sarah replied directly. Emily hid behind her, clearly frightened by Michael's changed appearance. Michael stepped away from the door, allowing them to enter. The apartment was exactly what Sarah expected, minimalist, stylish, with designer furniture and a magnificent view of the city. But it was also visibly messy, with papers strewn across the coffee table and abandoned coffee cups everywhere. "David told me about the resignation," Sarah said, sitting on the sofa while taking Lucas out of the stroller. "Why, Michael?" Michael sat in the armchair across from her, avoiding eye contact. "Because I couldn't pretend anymore that it was possible to juggle everything." "Juggle what?" "My family, the expectations, the company." Michael finally looked at her, and Sarah saw a deep exhaustion in his eyes. "My mom gave me an ultimatum, Sarah. Either I broke up with you and went back to Isabella, or she would call the board to question my competence to lead the company." Sarah felt as if she had been punched in the stomach. "And you chose to resign?" "I chose you," Michael corrected. "I chose our family. But in the process, I lost everything else I had built in life." Emily timidly approached Michael. "Are you sad?" Michael looked at the girl, and for the first time since they arrived, Sarah saw a glimpse of the man she knew. "I'm a little confused, Princess. When I get confused, my mom says it's because I'm trying to solve too many things at once," Emily said with the simple wisdom of children. "Maybe you need to solve one thing at a time." Sarah watched the interaction, feeling her heart tighten. "Michael, you didn't consult me about this decision." "How could I? You had asked for distance, remember? And then at the hospital with Lucas's birth, everything seemed perfect. But I knew the external pressure was still there. So you decided alone that it was better to sacrifice yourself." Sarah felt anger beginning to replace concern. "You decided it was better to destroy your future without even giving me a chance to fight by your side?" Michael abruptly stood up, walking to the window. "Sarah, you don't understand. My mom has enough influence to make our lives a nightmare. She can affect your job opportunities, create difficulties for Emily at school. And you think I'm so fragile that I couldn't handle that?" Sarah also stood up, Lucas still sleeping, peacefully in her arms. "Michael, I raised Emily on my own while finishing college. I worked 2 jobs to pay for a decent school for her. I faced judgmental looks and hurtful comments for being a single mom. Do you think I'm afraid of your mother?" Michael turned to face her, surprise replacing the resignation in his eyes. "But the company was yours, not your mother's," Sarah interrupted. "You built that place, Michael. You turned a family consultancy into a multinational, and you just handed it all over because you didn't have the courage to face a woman who's trying to control your life. I thought I was protecting you." "You were running away," Sarah said with brutal frankness. "You were running away from the first real fight our family would have to face together." The silence that followed was heavy. Emily had sat on the floor, playing with the toys she always carried in her bag, seemingly oblivious to the tension of the adults. "What do you want me to do now?" Michael finally asked, his voice laden with defeat. Sarah approached him, balancing Lucas in one arm and touching his face with her free hand. I want you to fight. I want you to go back and reclaim what is yours. I want you to show your mum, Isabella, everyone that our family is not a mistake. It's a choice. Sarah, you told me in the hospital that I was yours, that Emily was yours, that Lucas was yours. That means you are ours too, and we don't give up on the people we love. Michael covered her hand with his, closing his eyes. And what if we can't? What if the pressure is too much? Then we'll face it together and find another way. But at least it will be our decision, not their imposition. Emily looked up at that moment. Michael, are you going back to work? Because I drew you at your desk, and without you there, the drawing doesn't make sense. Michael knelt down to her level, a sad smile on his face. You know what, Emily? You're right. The drawings need to make sense. Sarah watched the two, seeing Michael make a decision in real time. When he stood up and looked at her again, there was a determination in his eyes that she recognized as the mark of the man she had fallen in love with. Are you sure you want to embark on this fight with me? He asked. Michael Anderson, Sarah said, her voice heavy, in a conviction that surprised even herself. I didn't run away when I raised Emily alone. I didn't run away when I found out I was pregnant with Lucas, and I definitely won't run away now that I've finally found a man worth having by my side. Michael kissed her then, a kiss that sealed a pact, a promise that, regardless of what lay ahead, they would face it together. And for the first time in days, Sarah felt they were back on the right path to build the future they had dreamed of together. The battle for the company's recovery lasted 3 tense weeks. Michael returned to the office on a Monday morning determined, but faced immediate resistance from the board of directors, who had been influenced by Mrs. Margaret Anderson, his mother, and her high society allies. Sarah followed every development through David, who had become a crucial information bridge. The situation is complicated, David reported during one of his daily calls to Sarah. Michael is struggling to reverse the resignation, but 3 board members voted against him. They say he is emotionally unstable and that his personal decisions compromise his leadership ability. Sarah was on the couch at home, nursing Lucas, while Emily did her homework at the kitchen table. The domestic routine contrasted sharply with the corporate drama unfolding downtown. And how is he handling it? Better than expected, actually. He's more focused than I've seen him in months. I think having you both as motivation changed everything for him. It was during that 3rd week of battle that Sarah made a decision that surprised everyone, including herself. She asked Lisa to take care of the kids for a few hours and showed up at the office on a Thursday afternoon, determined to face the situation head-on. Michael was in a meeting with the board when she arrived, so Sarah waited in the reception area, observing the comings and goings of tense executives and secretaries whispering in the hallways. It was clear that the company was going through a leadership crisis that affected all employees. Sarah, what are you doing here? Michael appeared 2 hours later, coming out of a clearly exhausting meeting. There were deep circles under his eyes, but he looked more determined than defeated. I came to talk to the board, she said simply. Michael stopped suddenly. Sarah, no, you don't need to. I do need to. Sarah stood up, adjusting the navy blazer she had carefully chosen for the occasion. Michael, they are questioning your leadership ability based on assumptions about our family. It's time for me to show them who I really am. Sarah, that's not how it works. The board won't just... The board will listen to me, Sarah interrupted with a firmness that made Michael reconsider his arguments. Because I have something. They need to know. An hour later, Sarah was sitting in a conference room on the 24th floor, facing 5 middle-aged men in expensive suits who were watching her with barely concealed curiosity. Michael was by her side, tense, but respecting her decision to speak for herself. "Gentlemen," Sarah began, her voice clear and professional, "I know you have questions about Michael's ability to lead this company based on his recent personal choices." Dr. Henry Moore, Isabella's father and leader of the opposition to Michael, leaned forward. "Ms. Johnson, with all due respect, I don't see how your presence here contributes to this discussion. It contributes because you are making business decisions based on personal prejudices," Sarah replied directly, "and that is detrimental not only to Michael but to the entire company." The silence that followed was tense. Sarah continued, pulling a folder of documents from her bag. "In the last 3 years, since Michael took full leadership of this company, you have had the best financial performance in the company's history. A 340% increase in revenue, expansion into 6 countries, and a 280% increase in stock value are direct results of his management." She distributed copies of the reports she had prepared. During this same period, Michael implemented employee wellness policies that reduced turnover by 60% and increased productivity by 45%. The company has become a benchmark in humane management in the industry. Dr. Moore flipped through the documents reluctantly. "Ms. Johnson, no one is questioning the technical competence. You are questioning his emotional competence based on the assumption that I am a distraction," Sarah interrupted. "But the facts show otherwise. Michael's best performance period coincides exactly with the time we started dating." Michael looked at her in surprise. Sarah had prepared a detailed analysis that he didn't even know she was doing. "Moreover," Sarah continued, "you are assuming that our family represents instability, when in fact it represents exactly the opposite." She leaned forward, staring at each board member. "Gentlemen, Michael is no longer working just for personal ambition or family pressure. He is working to build something lasting for his children. There is no more stable motivation than that." "His children?" one of the board members asked. "But Mr. Michael doesn't have biological children." "He has 2, Sarah corrected firmly. "Emily, 8 years old, and Lucas, 1 month old. The fact that they don't share DNA doesn't make them any less his children, and he doesn't love them any less than he would love biological children." Michael gently touched her hand under the table, a small but significant gesture. "Ms. Johnson," Dr. Moore said with barely concealed condescension, "I understand your position, but the reality is that Michael is facing significant family pressures due to this situation. This may affect his judgment." "It may," Sarah agreed, surprising everyone. "Just as Mr. Fernando's divorce affected his judgment for 2 years, resulting in 3 questionable business decisions that cost the company $12 million. Dr. Fernando, one of the board members, paled. Sarah had done her research. And just as Mr. Robert Collins' alcoholism issues affected his participation on the board, for 18 months, a period during which he automatically approved all proposals without proper analysis. Another uncomfortable silence. "The difference," continued Sarah, "is that the pressures Michael faces are external and temporary. They are a consequence of social prejudices that can be overcome. They are not destructive personal issues that compromise his reasoning ability." Dr. Moore leaned back in his chair, clearly uncomfortable. "And what do you propose?" "I propose that you evaluate Michael based on what really matters, results. If in the next 6 months the company's performance declines significantly, then you will have concrete reasons to question his leadership. But making a decision now, based on speculation about his personal life, is a mistake that could cost the company and shareholders millions." Sarah stood up, with Michael doing the same beside her. "Gentlemen, you have a choice. You can continue to be driven by social prejudices and lose the best CEO this company has ever had. Or you can focus on what truly matters, building a solid and profitable company." She paused, looking each of them in the eye. Michael doesn't need you to succeed. He has enough talent, experience, and determination to start from scratch and compete directly with you. The question is, do you have the courage to risk that? As they left the room, Michael was visibly impressed. Sarah, that was incredible. How did you know about the other board members' issues? 3 years analyzing this company's financial reports taught me to read much more than numbers, Sarah replied. And 3 years watching you taught me that sometimes you have to fight for what is worth it. Michael pulled her into a hug right there in the hallway. I love you, he whispered in her ear, and I'm starting to understand that you are much stronger than I ever imagined. Strong enough to face anything by your side, Sarah replied. 2 days later, the board voted for Michael's full reinstatement as CEO, 5 votes to 0. Dr. Moore had apparently chosen to abstain. The victory, however, Sarah knew was just the first step. The real battle for their happiness was just beginning. 6 months after Michael's reinstatement as CEO, life had found a rhythm that Sarah never thought possible. It was a February morning in 2024, and the summer heat of Austin was streaming through the windows of the apartment they had bought together in West Side, a compromise between the practicality Sarah needed and the elegance Michael was accustomed to. Sarah was in the kitchen, preparing morning coffee, while Lucas played in the playpen nearby, his dark hair already showing curls reminiscent of Michael's. Emily, now 9 years old, was finishing packing her backpack for the new school, a progressive institution that Michael had carefully chosen, where non-traditional families were not only accepted, but celebrated. "Mom, where is my presentation on family trees?" Emily shouted from her room. "On the living room table, dear," Sarah replied, smiling at the memory of the project. Emily had drawn a family tree that included Michael without hesitation, simply identifying him as "my dad, Michael." The child's naturalness had deeply touched both adults. Michael appeared in the kitchen, already dressed for work, but with a relaxed expression that Sarah had learned to appreciate. The last few months had been challenging. The social pressure had not completely disappeared, and Mrs. Margaret still maintained a chilly distance. But they had found ways to navigate the difficulties together. "Good morning, my love," Michael said, kissing Sarah gently before bending down to ruffle Lucas's hair. "How did our little one sleep last night?" "He slept 6 hours straight for the first time," Sarah replied, handing a cup of coffee to Michael. "I think he's finally adapting to the routine. Or maybe he's realizing he has a stable family and can relax," Michael said, a comment that carried the weight of the experiences they had both lived through. Emily appeared in the kitchen, dressed in her uniform and with her backpack on her back. "Dad, are you going to be able to come to the school presentation next week?" The word "dad" still made Michael pause slightly, not out of discomfort, but out of gratitude. He knelt down to Emily's level, adjusting her uniform bow. "I wouldn't miss it for the world, Princess. What time is it again?" 2 in the afternoon. The teacher said we can talk about how our families are special." Emily smiled. "I'm going to tell them I have the smartest dad in school." Michael and Sarah exchanged a look filled with emotion. In those simple, everyday moments, they understood that they had managed to build something solid and true. "Michael," Sarah said when Emily went outside to wait for the school bus, "I need to tell you something." Her tone made Michael stop stirring his coffee and look at her attentively. "What is it?" Sarah took a deep breath, unconsciously touching her still flat belly. "I went to the doctor yesterday. Dr. Smith confirmed." Michael stared at her for a moment before understanding hit him. "Sarah, are you pregnant?" she confirmed, carefully watching his reaction. 6 weeks along. It wasn't planned. I know we still have a lot to figure out." Michael interrupted her, picking her up in his arms and spinning her around the kitchen, a huge smile lighting up his face. "Sarah, this is wonderful." "Are you sure?" she asked when he set her back down. "It will be our first biological child together, but it also means 3 little kids, more responsibilities. It means our family is growing," Michael said, placing his hands on her face. "It means Lucas and Emily are going to have a little brother or sister. It means we are building exactly the life we dreamed of." Sarah allowed herself to relax in his arms, feeling the security she had learned to trust. "Your mother is going to be furious. My mother will have to accept that her opinions no longer dictate my life," Michael replied firmly. "By the way, I have news too." "What kind of news?" Michael smiled mysteriously. "Isabella got married last week in Paris to a French businessman she met. Yesterday." Sarah blinked, processing the information. "And how do you feel about it?" "Relieved," Michael replied honestly. "Happy for her that she found what she was looking for, and relieved because now my mum can't fantasize about reconciliations anymore." Lucas chose that moment to start crying, complaining about the lack of attention. Michael picked him up with the ease of an experienced father, gently rocking him. "What do you think, Lucas? Do you want a little brother or sister?" The baby stopped crying and smiled, as if he understood the question. Sarah watched the scene, Michael with Lucas in his arms, the aroma of Brazilian coffee filling the kitchen, the morning sun creating a golden light that turned an ordinary moment into something magical, and knew she had found not just love, but home. "Michael," she said softly, "thank you." "For what?" "For insisting, for fighting for us, for showing me that happy endings are possible when you have the courage to build them." Michael moved closer to her, balancing Lucas in one arm and pulling her near with the other. "Sarah, you saved my life as much as I saved yours. Before you, I was living a diminished version of myself, trying to meet expectations that weren't mine. And now I am exactly who I've always wanted to be. A man who loves deeply, a devoted father, and someone who builds a company not just for profit, but to create real opportunities for people like us." Sarah smiled, remembering the new policies Michael had implemented in the company over the past few months. Extended paternity leave, on-site childcare, and flexible hours for parents. Changes that were born directly from their experiences as a family. "Do the people at the company like the changes?" she asked. "They love them. Productivity has increased by 30%, and we have a waiting list of candidates wanting to work with us." Michael paused. "And David said you are considering going back to work?" "Not exactly back," Sarah corrected. "I'm thinking about starting my own consulting firm, financial management for small businesses, focusing on family sustainability. And I would be your first client," Michael said immediately. "Our company can outsource all the feasibility analysis for new projects to your consulting firm." Sarah laughed. "Michael, you can't just give me contracts because I'm your wife." "I'm not your husband," Michael said, suddenly more serious. He handed Lucas to Sarah and, to her surprise, knelt right there in the kitchen, pulling out a small blue box from his pocket. "Sarah Johnson," he said, his voice filled with emotion, "will you marry me? For real, officially, with a signed paper and a party for everyone to see." Sarah looked at the ring, a simple but elegant solitaire, then at Michael kneeling on the kitchen floor, then at Lucas in her arms, and finally at the life they had built together. "Yes," she said, tears streaming down her face, "but only if you promise that our party will have colourful banners and mulled wine. Emily would never forgive me if it wasn't a summer festival." Michael laughed, placing the ring on her finger and standing up to kiss her. "I promise, banners, mulled wine, and all the family we choose, not the one imposed on us." As they kissed, with Lucas giggling between them, Sarah knew she had finally found not just love, but the version of herself she had always dreamed of being, a loved, valued woman, free to build her own definition of happiness. 6 months later, they married in a celebration that blended the elegance Michael appreciated with the uncomplicated joy that Sarah and Emily loved. Mrs. Margaret attended, still reluctant, but visibly moved to see Michael dancing with Emily in his arms. And when Sarah, already showing her new pregnancy, tossed the bouquet, she aimed directly at Lisa, who had found a late but true love with David. As they danced the traditional waltz under the stars of a June night, Michael whispered in Sarah's ear, "Thank you for teaching me that true love is not about perfection, but about choosing to build something beautiful together, every day." Sarah smiled, looking at Emily dancing with David, at Lucas sleeping in Lisa's arms, and at the belly growing with their third child, the first that Michael would see born, knowing from the very first moment that it was completely his. "Thank you," she whispered back, "for proving to me that second chances are not just possible, they are the beginning of the most beautiful stories." And so, under the starry sky of New York, surrounded by the family they had chosen to build together, Sarah and Michael began the first day of the rest of their lives, knowing they had found something rare and precious, a love that had grown not despite the challenges, but because of the courage they had to face them together.